Hi, and welcome to Tech Leader TV. I'm your host, John Thomas Flynn, and this is our 9th season of TLTV, and we continue with a stellar lineup of topics and guests, the show that everyone's talking about, live streaming, video webcast, and cable television program focusing on public sector, information technology, and the political landscape. We come to you today courtesy of our sponsors, Unisys, LexisNexis, Xerox, Dimension Data, Veeam, Comcast, Microsoft, Tanium, Kronos, Optum, and our newest sponsor, Gigaman, the network security infrastructure company. And finally, Flynn Associates, a California-certified small business enterprise and trusted advisor for strategic IT business development, marketing, and solution services. And thanks for watching. The Tech Leader TV website continues to set new audience records. We're reaching thousands of state IT decision makers and vendor partners who recorded 250,000 page views last month alone. We recorded 2 million views last year, and our goal is to double that again in 2016 with your help. And we have a special program today with our guests DMV Director Gene Shiomoto and Deputy Director Bernard Soriano. Before we get started and I introduce Gene and Bernard, just a few observations if I may. The last several weeks have really provided a plethora of provocative issues to discuss. There's the nascent STAR or project approval process, evolving cloud computing directives, Count at 3 Oakland application season, a new procurement strategy on the replacement of the billion-dollar child welfare system, all punctuated by a withering legislative hearing on cybersecurity. Each one of these items could and will take up an entire show, and I can't wait to focus on an upcoming show on Agile. But for now, let's focus on cybersecurity. As Assemblyman Ed Chow said last week, what does the state of California spend on cybersecurity? For as long as I've been in Sacramento, 20 years now, I've been requesting actual figures on what the state spends annually on information technology. In 1996, when I was appointed the state's first CIO by Governor Wilson, I was told that the Department of Finance did a survey once a year to find out. A survey. Nice. Well, jump forward 2 decades, and you may be surprised to learn that the state's total IT spending is determined by, that's right, a survey, now conducted by the Department of Technology. Unfortunately, half of the state departments don't even submit the required information technology cost reports. That's why the estimates run from $3 billion to $6 billion annually. Nice, again. How is it that the federal government with a $3.5 trillion, with a T, $3.5 trillion budget is able to show off their $80 billion IT budget by agency, by department, even by project? The state of California has nothing even close to that level of detail and specificity. Say that 5 times. Specificity that's in the federal budget. Turning now to security, following the massive U.S. Office of Personnel Management data breach last year, there's been much attention in Congress and the media about just what the feds are spending on cybersecurity. Turns out most of the experts think that the approximately $12 billion a year the feds say they spend on cybersecurity is still way too little. But at least they can identify the current spending. As to Mr. Chow's question on the state of California's cybersecurity budget, sorry, have to get back to you on that, Mr. Assemblyman. It's pretty difficult to ask the legislature for additional resources, additional budget, when you don't even know what your current budget is. N'est-ce pas? Well, as usual on Tech Leader TV, we're going to continue to do our best to keep the spotlight on the state's management of its annual multi-billion-dollar IT investment, however much it is, to make government more efficient and more effective and secure. And hopefully we'll have a little fun along the way, keep your interests at the same time. Our motto is simple. As I like to say, California can always do better. Let's begin the journey now with our discussion on technology, politics, and as I like to say, other unnatural acts. I'll be right back with our guest in just a moment, and we'll begin. Hi, and welcome back to Tech Leader TV. As I mentioned, our guests today are Gene Shiomoto, the Director of the Department of Motor Vehicles, and Deputy Director Bernard Soriano. Gene was appointed Director of the Department of Motor Vehicles in 2013, and she actually has been at the Department of Motor Vehicles for more than a quarter of a century with some 35, 36 years of state service, much of which we'll get to talk about during the show. Bernard Soriano is the Deputy Director and former CIO of the California Department of Motor Vehicles with over 30 years of experience in engineering and management in both public and private sectors. And prior to DMV, he was the CIO for the Secretary of State's office. So Gene, Bernard, welcome to Tech Leader TV. Glad to have you back, as a matter of fact, because you were here just about 2 years ago.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
So what's in your budget?
What's in my budget?
No, I'll say, you know, one of the things I love about saying about when I'm in California, coming from Massachusetts, and I said, you know, what's the biggest difference? And I just said, everything here has 3 or 4 more zeros at the end of it. So tell us about your organization, the budget, the staff, that kind of thing first.
Okay, so we have approximately 9,500 employees for the California Department of Motor Vehicles, the largest of all the DMVs in all the United States.
Not surprising.
Yeah, we do it big, and we have a budget about $1 billion, and we license about 25 million licensed drivers, and we have about 34 million registered vehicles in California. So compare that to about 38.5 million Californians. That's pretty big.
It is big. Yeah, big job, big job. Bernard, IT staff, how large is your IT group?
Well, actually, within IT, there's a spend of about $100 million per year is the IT budget. And it's not actually under myself. There's Stacy Cochran is the CIO. Under him, he has a staff of about 600 or so employees. Compare that to the staff of 10,000 that the director just mentioned. We've got a sizable organization.
Yeah, I think you brought some of your colleagues with you today from Stacy's shop, right?
That's right. We've got the assistant deputy director over our infrastructure area, as well as the assistant deputy director over the application development area.
You can throw out their names. Give them a little ink.
We've got Sean Woodland here and Naveen Arora in the audience.
Oh, welcome. Welcome to Tech Leader TV. You know, one of the greatest challenges any chief information officer or any CTO, anybody that's managing IT, one of the biggest challenges is to be able to align the business side with the technology side. And I think by having you folks here today, as you did 2 years ago, really demonstrates that very. How did you do that? How did you get business and the program side and the director, executive champion like Gene is, to work hand in hand with technology? It's not easy.
No, it's not easy at all. In fact, that's one of the classic problems with IT and getting successful projects done. Within the department, we have a pretty active project management office. We have project managers that take on the role very seriously. They're PMP certified. And then as we run projects, we have all of the classical elements that need to be in place: oversight, IV&V, and we follow a system development lifecycle that's very defined. And in doing so, we had to involve the business in with managing IT. We had to focus on making sure that the requirements are really well defined. Well, first of all, the requirements are known, written down, well defined before we take on projects. And we found that to be very successful.
And Gene?
So what we also did, to add on to what Bernard said, is that we get program involved with IT. The project sponsors have both the program sponsor and an IT sponsor and administrative. So we have business, program, and IT collectively together running the project, and everything has to go through them, any changes, change orders, so everybody's in the know so that it's not siloed. So that's been working very well for us.
Because, you know, a lot of times you can set up that organization, if you will, that hierarchy of having a program person involved with a technology person on a project, but so often, next thing you know, the program person's deputy, and then the deputy's deputy goes to the meetings and so on. How do you keep that esprit de corps, if you will, working together with the program people and technology people? Because sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah, well, a lot of it comes from the top. It's the message from the director that this is how it's going to work. And there are some tools in place. For example, I mentioned the oversight function. Oversight looks at the projects, brings up the risks, assesses what those risks are, and then has a reporting relationship to the director. She gets a meeting one-on-one with the oversight group, and they get a chance to inform the director of their concerns on the particular projects. And that's huge, because that keeps the program honest, keeps IT honest, and keeps the project on track.
I mentioned earlier that you've spent 25 or so more years at DMV. Tell us a little bit about that, your career and what you did. I seem to recall that you were a fiscal officer for a large portion of that.
I started out my career in 1980 first as an auditor for developmental services. Then
We've had auditors and CPAs. That seems like all we get on this show anymore.
But that fiscal background really brings a lot to the job. General Services was there for about 8 years, working in their financial fiscal systems area. Then came to DMV in financial systems and worked in systems development. And through my career, been in the right place, right time. Moved up into being fiscal officer, the budget officer, the controller, and then deputy director, chief deputy, and the director. So it's led me well. My fiscal background has really served me well.
Yeah, I guess. And Bernard, you have a very kind of a Renaissance man over at the Department of Motor Vehicles.
I call it a Renaissance.
But you've had such an interesting background. Why don't you tell people a little bit about it?
I've been with the department for a little over 10 years. In fact, when I joined, Jean was the budget officer, and so she controlled the strings. And,
He's very nice to me.
and,
Looks like it paid off.
I'll see.
My background's very much in the engineering field. I'm an engineer by training. My undergraduate was in mechanical and aeronautical engineering, and continued that throughout my educational career. So my PhD was in engineering in control systems. Worked in aerospace for quite a number of years with control systems before coming over to state service. And that engineering background really helps with regard to within IT as well as within managing a plethora of different shops that have varied responsibilities.
Well, don't leave off the golf, okay?
Well, yes. So I also, for a period of time, I was the assistant technical director at the United States Golf Association.
What a job. What are you doing at DMV after something like that? How'd you leave? And also interesting about the astronaut program. I've always been
I was a finalist for the astronaut program.
Very interesting, I must say. Let's talk about your top IT. And before I leave that, I didn't realize this, but you were born in Hawaii.
I was born and raised in Hawaii.
Same
that's right.
year as our president, if I'm not mistaken.
Actually, he's a year older than me.
Did you? I know you. Did you get to know him in high school or anything like
that?
No,
he grew up.
We're looking for scoops here, okay? That's what Tech Leader TV is all about.
Yeah, he grew up on the island of Oahu, and I grew up on the lonely island of Kauai.
Oh.
And so,
well, I thought when you were playing ball for the Immaculate Conception, you had to run into him over at that fancy prep school that he went to.
No, did not know our president when I was growing up.
So, IT initiatives. You've got a $100 million IT budget. Tell us about some of the major projects currently going on and planned in the next fiscal year.
So currently, for last year, we implemented AB 60 was licensing undocumented immigrants, so we were very successful in that. We've licensed over 600,000 undocumented immigrants got their license, and seen probably about 800,000 of them so far. We had estimated that there's about 2.8 million undocumented immigrants living in California, and that we would see 1.4 million over the next 3 years. We've seen close to 800,000 so far, and it's been very successful for us. And one of the things that we were...
I believe I read that over half the registrations last year were from trigger warning illegal aliens.
Well, undocumented immigrants is the correct terminology, but what we're proud of is what we did is we were able to develop a relationship with foreign consulates, and especially with the Mexican Consulate General here in California, in Sacramento. And we're the second state to develop an electronic interface with the Mexican database for their passports, consular cards, and voter identification cards to verify that that card has been issued by the Mexican government. So we have that electronic interface, and so that is a speedier process for us to get the customers in and out. So we're very proud of that electronic interface.
You know, I always wonder about when you're going through that process, and I believe that the majority of people these people would take the exam in Spanish. How do they get the? How do they pass be able to see a stop sign or something like that? Is there a certain test for learning enough English to?
So
how does that work?
We have the knowledge test in Spanish, and we have the handbook in Spanish. And when they actually have to take the drive test, through communication, our examiners are able to communicate, and they do know English. And what we found is they're already very good drivers because they've been driving. They shouldn't have been, but they're very good drivers. They've been passing the drive test exam very successfully. So they're able to communicate. They recognize the signs. So they're very successful.
And I believe you told me you actually have a figure on how much it costs to go through this whole program to enact AB 60.
I think it was close to, can't remember exactly, maybe.
I want to say 140 or something like that.
I don't think we got $140 million.
All right.
I don't have the exact number on that, but I can get back to you on it.
Okay.
So another thing that we're working on, and actually Bernard is very active, is autonomous vehicles. So,
Really?
Yeah. And so with his, as you led into, I think you must have set this up, you led into his engineering background. And so we've been charged with developing the regulations, and our testing regulations were effective September 2014. And we have currently about 11?
We have 11 companies that are
Testing?
testing autonomous vehicles in California at this
on the
time.
public roadways, and so we're working on our deployment regulations, the operations. So we have a draft out there for comment, and we've had 2 public hearings, and we're getting comments back from the different manufacturers. So we're excited about that because we're able to meet with the different manufacturers, learn about their technology, and as you see different cars on the road, you see the different commercials, they're doing little teasers about the technology, and so we're learning a lot, and we're really excited to be working on this.
I bet. Certainly the sublime side of this business. But back to the mundane stuff. Some of the other projects, I think you have BCPs out for a number of projects for the next fiscal year. What are those all about?
So we have a budget request in right now to expand the self-service terminals we have in our field offices. Currently we have 50. We want to expand those out from our field offices to the retail area where we can serve our customers another option to come and do their business in a retail area.
So at a mall as opposed to the DMV?
A grocery store, maybe a mall. We're trying to figure out what that would be. And so it's less foot traffic in our field offices, a less car taking up a parking space because parking is a premium. Our parking lots are not that big. I was down last week visiting the LA Hope Street office, and you must have circled around about 5 times before we found a parking space. And if we can get our customers out of our offices doing business elsewhere, those other businesses also gain more foot traffic and business there too. So we're excited be going through our budget hearings and presenting that funding request to expand that, and that's about $8 million.
And
currently 80 million?
Currently those self-service terminals are basically kiosks, and they're in our field offices, and customers walk up to them and they can renew their vehicle registration using those kiosks, so they don't have to stand in line or wait to see a real person to get their business done.
Right. Anything else?
So we're also working on, this is a funding request that we got approved last year, and talking about cybersecurity is we're starting up a security operations center. And so that was about a $8 million, $2.5 million project. And so we're in the process of just standing it up. We're running through its paces. We have big screens on TVs, and we're going to be monitoring our systems 24/7. And so we're looking at anything that comes through. Our staff are going to be trained to bring it to someone else's attention. We're working through the governance process of if something comes to our attention, does it go to our IT, privacy and policy area, security, or does it go to our investigations or to an operations area to see what is really going on with what the activity.
Any particular technologies that you're using, vendor technologies, to assist you in that?
A lot of different vendors. I think I need Sean to help me out on who they are. But
we'll go over that at the reception
we can do
afterwards.
that. But for us, it's having our systems monitored 24/7. It's going to be on these screens, and it's like being in a control room. And the staff are being hired right now. They're going to be trained to see what they look for and bring it to our attention. So we're excited because we're going to be the first state agency to ever have a 24/7 operations area monitoring our security.
Yeah.
And John, that's going to be huge because, as you know, we collect a lot of information, particularly from individuals. Right? We have information about you. We have information about basically all Californians, and we take our responsibility to secure that data very seriously.
Right. Well, was there a breach there?
It was not a breach.
It was
not a breach.
It was not a breach.
Misinformation.
Yes.
Let's straighten that out right here on Tech
So
Leader
we
TV.
had forensic investigation conducted, and they went through everything that was IT, looked at all our firewalls, connectivity, information going in and out, and nothing was found, nothing was compromised, and so that led us to submit the request to stand up a security operations center to monitor our systems 24/7.
I've forgotten this. Do you have your own data center, or do you use OTEC?
We use OTEC.
Right.
That's what I thought. Okay. Well, speaking of security, what is your cybersecurity budget?
Well, we currently spend about $1.5 million per year on information security. That's at the low end. That does not take into account PY costs and so forth. But
PY?
Personnel years. So that's still a fairly big number in terms of what we we spend on information security, that does not take into account the privacy aspect, because we see information security and privacy as two separate issues. They're related, but they're separate.
Right.
And the privacy side, it's very much on the usage of the data, and when data gets compromised, how you respond. Whereas on the information security side, it's very much about protecting the data.
You know, one of the things that I want to make sure we cover, and that was the AB60 again, from the standpoint of huge increase, you know, as you said, in number of licenses that had to be issued. That must have been a real challenge from a technological standpoint, not to mention from an operational standpoint. On the operational side, I remember you mentioned something about big box stores you had to start.
So we had authorization. We hired close to 1,000 employees. So we started giving examinations to get eligible people on the test to the proper classification. So we started actually doing interviews and onboarding employees. We started in August, and we were onboarding about 180 employees every 2 weeks, so we were fully staffed by the end of December. We opened up 4 temporary processing centers, and they were like big box type of Costco-size offices, and it was like gluing together 2 offices together, where we had one side was appointments and one side was non-appointments. And so we made any original driver's license request, you had to do an appointment, whether you're turning 16, first time to get a license, coming from out of state, or applying for an AB60 license, you had to have an appointment. That was for us to be able to manage the number of people.
Did that work out pretty well?
It worked out great.
Yeah.
So what we also did is we expanded our appointment system from 45 days to 90 days, so that there was more appointments available.
I see.
And then we also did Saturday service for almost 10 months. So we offered service to folks on Saturday if you couldn't get there during the week. We did some extended hours in some of the offices. We opened at 7 o'clock versus 8 o'clock. So we made adjustments for our workforce to make sure that we were able to serve everybody in time.
And as I recall, there was a big issue where you really geared up your call center and help desk and all that to be able people to call in.
We were anticipating
Your
a lot
virtual hold. You made a number of interesting innovations
we'll
there.
call you back. But another thing then in preparation for AB60 was the number of people that are going to want to get our information from our website. What documents do you need? What do you need to become in the field office, and actually making that appointment, because you can make it through our website, is that we made a push to expand the capacity for our website and upgrade all the equipment behind for our website. And so we're able to do that. And so I'm proud to say that our website never went down. It was running 24/7, and that was from the support of the Department of Technology, OTEC.
Well, you know, if it did go down, you'd certainly would have heard about it.
I would have heard about it.
In fact,
our government would have heard about it.
It's very, very interesting that you were as successful in that whole implementation as you were, because you didn't hear a peep. It wasn't like Obamacare or something like that that was, you know, falling, you know, off the rails during implementation, crashing the site and everything else. So you'd be
We
congratulated
learned
for
from
that.
We watched that, and so we worked hard to make sure the website was ready when we first implemented, and it was, you never saw it. It was behind the scenes.
And that was an example of business and IT working really, and program working very closely together. And again, because of the engagement of upper management, the director was heavily engaged in this, that it was a success.
Well, you know, that was kind of like an opening scenario, if you will, or of what comes next, and that is Real ID, which kind of been put back when for the last 8 years, but now it's coming back where states have to comply with that.
Right.
And why don't you tell us a little bit about how you're going to have to? It sounds like, is it 28 million people that have a driver's license are going to have to come in physically?
So we're trying to determine how best to address this. So we have an California has an extension through October 2016 this year. We will apply for another extension. Department of Homeland Security is actually going to do enforcement to board a plane in 2018. And they have not said that if you are not a Real ID compliant state, they haven't said what are the forms of identification you will need at the airport to get on a plane. If you have a passport, you can board the plane. But if you don't have a Real ID compliant driver's license, you may not be able to board that plane. But they haven't.
But you've got to be thinking about this.
We're
now
looking
for the
at
state of
it, and
California.
so full compliance will be in 2020, and so we're looking at how do we bring in and recertify 28 million Californians. So we're looking at
28 million people have to come in. All right, now hear this at Tech Leadership. 28 million people have to come in person at DMV, at least now, at least
Well,
the
we're
way it's
looking
right
at
now.
have to determine
We
how
Now
that
this,
happens.
you know what my first thought when I heard that, Gene, this may be an excellent time to get those retirement papers ready. Throw this on Bernard's lap. Imagine 28 million people. Holy
I wouldn't
cow.
leave the department for that.
Well, no, but what a challenge that's
We're
going to
looking
be.
at it. We're looking at
Yeah,
different ways.
big box stores all over the state.
We have 4 already.
Yeah.
We'd like to keep them.
We got a head start.
Yeah, well, that's certainly, given your experience with the, with the AB60, it'll certainly be helpful in how to do that, I would think, big time. Motor voter's another one. It seems you're one of those agencies that gets so impacted by the political side of the legislature and bills that go in that they don't even realize it when they're doing this, but the impact it has not only your operations but your technology. Talk about motor voter a bit.
So we're working on that AB 1461. So we're charged with helping register Californians to vote. And so they come to the DMV. They have to redo business, renew their driver's license, or apply for original driver's license, change their address. So we're making some revisions to our offices and to our systems to register everybody to vote. So we're going to move people as they come in and they want to register to vote. To gather the voter information, your party preference, and your information is we have our touchscreen terminals in our offices, so we're going to direct them over there once they get through their DMV business, and they can, through the touchscreen, select their party preference, their language that they want to do this in, and so we're working on making those changes in our office into our procedures.
How about if I do it electronically? Will I get some kind of prompt that takes me to do that, or is that still in the developing stage?
To vote, or?
Well, no, I'm saying to get registered to vote right now. If you come into the DMV office for any reason, it sounds like you're going to have this
It's a paper
opportunity.
process today.
But would it also affect people that do it electronically? Like now, what percentage of people? I think it used to be 35%, but it's probably even higher now. Use this to register their vehicles, for example. It's pretty high.
Well, they come right now. It's a paper process. We're going to move the paper form that they fill out. You fill it out, your voter information. So now we're going to collect it and transfer that information electronically to Secretary of State.
Okay.
But you still have to designate what party you are.
Yeah, but if you come in, I'm saying if you do this electronically, there's not a procedure. There isn't a procedure plan to be able to register to vote. Although that may happen. It's just got to send them over to the Secretary of State's website, I guess.
Yeah, and so online, if you want to renew your
See,
driver's
that's my
license, we
idea,
can do
so
that.
let me get credit for that.
Okay.
One of the other things we talked about before is we talk about big data, and so often the data is kept in jail and people don't have access to it, all part of the open data, the transparency issue and all that. And I know one of the real fascinating things about some departments is they actually have data that's valuable. And in your case, the Department of Motor Vehicles, I know you have data that's very valuable, for example, to insurance companies. Tell us a little bit about that and how that works.
So that's our information services program, and we sell that information to insurance companies where they have access to it, so they pay for it. So if you go in and you want to apply for insurance, you're shopping around, for the insurance companies to give you a rating, they have to know whether you're a good driver, if you have anything on your record. So they have access to determine what your driving record is to give a quote for a policy. And so they have to pay us to be able to access and get access to that information.
Okay. How much is that worth?
It's about $65 million to us, and so there's a lot of people there. We have a lot of drivers, and a lot of people buy cars, and they also have to get insurance. So the insurance companies need to know what that information is. And so also, if you go rent a car, you have to show your driver's license, and so they ping our database, and they get either a yes/no response whether you have a valid California driver's license. And so they have to pay for access to that.
Okay. Okay. We talked a little bit earlier about that, the legacy information system at DMV, and you mentioned about Grant Thornton actually doing some kind of an analysis in terms of a project you're looking at. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So Grant Thornton came in. We were moving forward with our modernization project, and it was canceled. So what was asked for was an assessment of where we were at and what we had implemented so far. So Grant Thornton came in. They did an assessment, and they made a determination. Their recommendation was, as you move forward, to move forward with modernization in smaller chunks, smaller projects, and not the big bang. And so we're looking at that, and looking at what else is out there. Do we go out with the COTS? Try to look for COTS, or what we learned in talking to different vendors, we could refactor our current code, because our current code is assembly and EDL, and it's old language and not really supportable anymore. So
Look at her throwing around these terms, huh?
She knows what she's talking about.
So how do we continue to move forward and sustain our system? And so we're looking at refactorization to bring it up to current code.
Don't
which is
just say
Java.
that word without, say it slow. It's a new word. It's a new word for Tech Leader TV.
Refactorization.
Refactorization. And that is?
To bring your current code up to your code you have today, which is legacy code, up to current code, for example, to Java.
Okay.
So we're excited about looking at that and doing that in smaller phases to finish our project. And then from there, modernize your systems. It's hard to do both at the same time because you have to re-engineer all your systems. And so we were looking at taking it in a smaller pace, smaller projects, so we're successful.
I think we have our headline for this show now, refactorization. That'll get everybody's attention. Almost as much as you're driving around on bald tires and getting flat tires.
That's true, yeah, our
Not
adventure on
bringing that
Tuesday.
Well, we won't bore people with that. So in terms of this refactorization project, what can the vendors look for in terms of when something like that may hit the streets, or what's your procurement
we would put a
process?
request out for proposal for whoever has the skill set and the software that could do that for us, so we're looking at that. Texas has done it. They were very successful. Washington State was looking at that, and so with the success factor in terms of just bringing your code so it's supportable, we want to get there versus trying to modernize everything all at one shot. So we would put a request for proposal out.
Time frame?
This
probably,
year? No, probably not this year. We're probably looking for a funding request for the next budget cycle.
Okay, very good.
So next budget cycle, look for something.
Okay. I know you're very proud of this Network Operations Center. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that? I mean, sorry, security, the security center.
Security
Yeah,
Operations Center.
Right.
Right. So it's in a secure facility, and we're staffing that up now.
Don't tell us where.
No, we won't. And as the director had said, the focus of that SOC, as we call it, is to monitor our valued information assets, both internal as well as externally facing assets, and to assess the threats, assess any risks that those assets have, and then to actually mitigate any things that get noticed. So it's a fully operational center that, if you will, is providing some sort of oversight on our IT assets.
And is that up and running now, or?
It's in the process of becoming fully functional. So we've started. We have it staffed with a minimal set of folks now. We anticipate it to be functional, fully functional, very soon, later this year.
Let's talk social media. Nice, easy questions for you. You've been a big user of social media. In fact, I think you've got some awards for it over the last few years. Tell us about how that started and what your lessons learned and where you're going with that.
So we started probably, I think, around in 2010,
Yeah,
2010, 2012, and we started as a 6-month pilot. We were the first state agency to actually stand up a social media program, and we started small. We started promoting some of our business service options, and we started with doing some tweets on Twitter and Facebook, posting on Facebook, and actually it was very successful. Where there was concern was our going to get negative comments and things, and it's been very successful. We were able to get out information to customers, field office locations, what do you need to be prepared to come to the DMV, and so we have about 26,000 followers on our social media, so we're proud of that, and it's been very successful. Next thing that we're doing with social media is called Periscope, where if there's an event like this, we can televise it live to our followers.
Oh.
Right.
So we continue to move the bar up in terms of social media.
Well, send those to us, and we'll make sure they get a copy of this video on demand. What's new? What's the latest thing? How's your Answer Man doing? I remember you have a...
We do. We have
Answer
a DMV Answer Man, and he's sort of a character very similar to Flo with Progressive Insurance. A little quirky sometimes, and that type of character. And so he addresses various DMV issues that the general public would be interested in. As we were doing AB 60, we had a Spanish version of the Answer Man, and that proved to be quite successful. And then also with social media, we used social media and did a lot of Facebook posts in Spanish as well to help with that regard.
And I seem to recall you also have you do a survey, or people can tell your experience with DMV.
We have several.
What is that? How does that work?
Well, we have different venues to collect feedback from our customers.
Is it like a Yelp thing? Or?
Well, we have, if you conduct business with us online, and say you renew your registration online, you're given the option to provide us feedback on how great the service was to you. And so we get that feedback. We also deploy some employees out to the field offices periodically to do surveys with customers as they leave the field office. So we survey in-person field customers. In addition, this is something else that we've done, is we survey our employees on how we are doing as an employer. And we take those results, and as a management team, we really take those points to heart and try and improve our organization, not just for our external customers, but our employees as well. So we have several ways of getting feedback from our customers and employees.
Right. I was at DMV, and I had to wait a little while even though I had an appointment. But I always notice this: why don't you put up some CNN TVs or something like that in there? Has that ever come across your mind? Another revenue opportunity.
We have message boards in our offices,
Yeah.
and so we have. We're actually starting up this project right now called Customer Flow. So we're expanding
Customer
Flow.
Flow.
So we're upgrading our appointment system,
FLO after that.
and we're going to put message boards in all our offices where we're going to have messages in terms of safety, driver safety, and locally some retail outlets could put some messages. So it's not going to be quite CNN. It's going to be DMV CNN.
All right, cool. DMV CNN, I like that too. Is that going to be a procurement associated with that?
So we already we're in the procurement phase right now.
Is that right?
And so can't talk
See, I always
about
ask these
I can't
questions.
talk about
I
it.
always ask these questions. Which project are you on now? Just floats out somehow by the end of the show. But that's good. So that's it's a procurement going on now.
It's
It's
going
in the
on
works.
right now.
Okay. In fact, now that you mention, I think you were going to do one of these a few years ago, but there was no budget for it. You're going to make the companies pay for it. That didn't work, I don't think.
I don't know what that one was.
Yeah, we had talked about message boards in our
Yeah.
field offices for a number of years,
Yeah.
and trying to strategize what would be the best way to do this.
Yeah. Well, that's great. A good idea.
Right.
Because it is pretty dismal no matter what you do about it.
It's
But
a
it's
great
nice that you're also looking at it.
Right.
Thanks
And
for also
we
looking
recognize
at it.
that our appointment system could use an update, right?
Yeah.
Because it's an appointment system that has been used for quite a number of years, and there's new technologies now that are available, and so we're going to take advantage of that.
Yeah. I noticed the signs now on the Kaiser Permanente where I think you can get an appointment to go to the emergency room. That's interesting.
You're going to know ahead.
Who knew?
of
Yeah.
appointments.
Who knew? One of the other things that I wanted to talk about is your relationship with the Department of Technology, and I mean that from a positive standpoint. There's a number of initiatives that Carlos has rolled out over the years. In fact, I call them Ramos's rules in a complimentary way, because there's certain directives, if you will, that are supposed to make things flow easier and everything. And obviously one of them is a new project approval process. Have you had a chance to experience the new project approval process?
Yes.
What do you think of that?
Actually, we have some employees that were part of the new project approval process development, and so they were involved with how this could be rolled out to the departments. And we work very closely with the Department of Technology, and we do it also in conjunction with our agency. So our agency is also aware of what the new rules are and how we need to move forward. So we're aware of that. We have a whole team that is well educated in terms of making sure our business side and IT are going to move forward and follow this process.
There's one of the other more controversial issues, at least in the community, so to speak, is the vendor scorecard, how they're going to put a scorecard on vendor performance. What do you think of that?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with improving the procurement cycle, because that seems to be the one area of project management that is a sore point, right? Because you get a project approved and you have to go through a procurement cycle that could be long and onerous, and by the time you get a vendor on board, the technology has changed. So it's a way to address the whole issue of procurement.
Yeah, it is very interesting, because NASCIO, the executive director, Doug Robinson, just came out with a story recently about the NASCIO members, the state CIOs. One of their top things is procurement reform. But it mentioned how people really wanted to make changes to it, but it turns out there's very few IT organizations, state CIOs, that actually have authority for IT procurement. California now is one, at least the big projects and all that. But there's only a half a dozen around the country, states that allow that. So you're going to if you do have that kind of, and we're starting to see some big changes. This new agile strategy, agile design, and agile related procurements. It's really going to change. It's going to change things enormously, particularly from the vendors. Well, from both sides, a huge change. Quick 6-month projects, getting something to work up and running rather than waiting for 3 or 4 years for the big boom rollout.
Right.
Big changes.
But I think key is the requirements. You gotta know what your requirements are.
Yeah, yes, and that's always been a bugaboo, because during the design stage, it very often happens that you go around and talk to people that are using the system now, and they just don't articulate it in a way that you really, and then you write it down, you think you got it cold, then you develop a system to do it that, and they go, wait a minute, that's not what I said.
Exactly.
You know how you get those signatures down there. But you know, making it shorter and keeping those people that are going to use the system involved in the design and development of it, that changes the whole landscape.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and hopefully we'll make, because how many times do we see when these things come out and the first problems start to rise when the users say, well, I can't use this thing, I got to run 2 systems now, I'm losing my data.
Right.
Yeah, those are, we've all been through those, those situations before. Well, we're almost done, so I want to thank you very much for being on the show. As I said, we'll get a chance to go over some of the more provocative issues, as I like to say, when we have our little reception in a few minutes. But one thing I did want to ask, and you know, just in 1 minute, 30 seconds, what did you learn about leadership from the astronaut program?
Oh, you always have one of these
Time's up.
questions.
Time's up. But you know, seriously.
Oh, you know, leadership is about, you know, making sure employees are engaged, and you got to take care of your employees. You got to make sure communication is always flowing, because you know, on a mission, you've got to communicate, right?
Right.
And
Very
so,
important.
yeah, communication and just making sure employees are in the loop.
Okay. You know, I understand that your parents were in internment camps during World War II. In fact, I think one of your siblings might have been born there.
My oldest sister was born in
so
a camp.
that must have had such an impact on you. And how did that channel you in such a way, perhaps, to go into public service?
You know, my father was a farmer, pear rancher. I grew up on the 80-acre pear ranch, and they were my
From
mom,
Delta to DMV, as
but
Cameron said.
He worked hard, and my mom worked hard. We had a crew of workers, and we made 3 meals every day for the crew. So it was working hard. They never talked about their experience in internment camp. My uncle talked about it once and said he remembers being transferred from Sacramento to Fresno, and he was on the train. They had 1 suitcase. And he said they lived in the stalls, the horse racing stalls. And so they were very proud.
And your father was in the 442nd,
He was in the
right?
442, yeah, but he didn't get shipped overseas. He broke his leg. So I'm here.
Well, listen, thank you all very much. I know we're running out of time. Have great shows coming up in the spring. We've got Karen Johnson from Department of Healthcare Services and Barney Gomez. And also we're going to have Chris Cruz on. We'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.